Well, good morning, everybody. Mark Finan here in the home weather office on this Friday morning. It is now the 9th day of August, 2024. Back on Friday. I did take yesterday off. I asked my boss here at Mark Finan Weather if I could have yesterday off, and they granted it. But back here on this Friday morning, going to update you on the fires going on, especially the Crozier Fire burning in El Dorado County. Show you where it's burning, where it's likely to burn, and the areas that are going to be impacted by not only the fire but the smoke. I'm also going to talk about this big pattern change that we have coming up. We are going to see significantly cooler weather as we head toward the weekend and into next week. So I'll show you how that pattern is going to evolve and how, well, it still might not be all that great news for our fire situation. Let me get first to what is happening this morning. And we'll start with the satellite. A lot going on this morning. This is the smoke coming off the Crozier Fire, burning rather robustly this morning. You can see some smoke into Tahoe, although it's thinner than it was yesterday afternoon. During the overnight hours, a lot of the smoke drifted up into Placer County, past the American River up here, the North Fork, and then all the way to the north. That'll get thinned out during the day today as the winds once again will turn more southwesterly and carrying that smoke more up the Interstate 80 corridor and likely into areas around the North Shore. Going up here to the Park Fire, this is a really cool satellite because you can see during the early morning hours how the smoke comes down the canyons. It's really interesting with the cool air in the morning, just how that smoke comes down the canyons. But this is actually where the fire is burning, and it looks as though that's just about to run out of space. That's likely now getting up toward Highway 36, maybe crossing 36, but running into the area around the that was burned by the Dixie Fire. And of course, we also have a nice marine layer this morning. We'll also have an onshore breeze. Temperatures this afternoon in the valley in most areas will reach the upper 90s to around 100 degrees, and we'll do that again tomorrow, but there is more cooling on the way. I'll talk more about that coming up in just a little bit. So let's take a look at what's going on with the fire burning in El Dorado County this morning. Many have noted that it appears to be burning in two distinct areas, two big columns of smoke coming up. In the early morning hours, these smoke columns don't get pushed too far up into the air, although this one's very interesting. And I'm recording this around 8:30. And as you can see, look in here, and I'll play this again, because watch what happens in here. Most of this is white smoke, but watch what happens here. That's a burst of some black smoke, getting into some heavier fuels in here. Tough to say exactly where this is and what that is burning, but let's go to the fire perimeter. This once again comes from WFIGS. If you want to find these, just do a Google search for WFIGS, and you'll find a source for these fire perimeters. So this is where the fire started, down in here, and this is where the fire is spreading to. Now you'll note that as I zoom in on this, that the fire is right along this road. This is Mosquito Road here. So this is good, where they're probably trying to hold it. However, it does look as though there's a spot out here, and whether or not it's going to get out to this road, don't know. And also out in here, I looked at this actually might be a spot that got out into a clear cut. I think there's a clear cut out in here. But if you look at this map, you'll see that in this Sailor Ravine here, it looks as though it may be getting into this drainage. And if it gets into that drainage is perfectly aligned to the southwesterly winds we'll have this afternoon and the next couple of afternoons. And so we could see it make a bit of a run in here. We'll have to see about that. But let's talk a little bit about where this is burning. I'm going to use my mapping here. So let's zoom in a little bit. So this is the area where the fire started, down in this area in here. This is just always an interesting feature here, just that really stands out on the satellite. Now, it was interesting because the fire started down in this area, and it did eventually get to the top of this. This looked like a really nice natural fire break, but the fire did get up here. And then I pointed out Mosquito Road that the fire was getting up against, which is right here. I think they did a firing operation here, and so it's this area that has burned. But if you go a little bit farther to the east, you start noticing that the geography changes, and that's because this is still left over from the King Fire. Now, the King Fire was 10 years ago, but if you look at all of this area out in here, it is still, well, there's not much out here. If the fire gets out here, it'll act like a grass fire. But the thing is that if it gets out here, it doesn't burn as fast. I shouldn't say fast. It could burn very fast, but it doesn't burn very hot. And the other thing is, if it got out into an area like this, fire retardant is very effective. So if it started to escape out into areas that had been previously burned by the King Fire in 2014, like this, especially this area around Stumpy Meadows, you can see here that at Stumpy Meadows, the King Fire got all the way down to the south shore of Stumpy Meadows. It did not get to the other side. But if the current fire decided to go in this direction, well, I think they'd have, well, A, it would run out of fuel, and B, they'd be able to do some pretty good protection before it got to Stumpy Meadows. However, the areas farther to the north, the area around Quintet and this area along Wentworth Springs Road, these are the areas that were west of the King Fire and could still be vulnerable. And then if you go farther to the north from there, then you get back into this scar, and that, of course, is from the Mosquito. So you have a couple of different burn areas here. You have Mosquito here, and you have King here, but the fire is burning down in this area, and that's where it could continue to grow. Last estimate I saw, I think, was something like 1,700 acres. We'll see how much that does or doesn't grow during the course of the day today. Let's talk a little bit about the weather and the weather patterns that are going on here, because consider this part 2 of the chat, because we are seeing a pattern change that's beginning to develop. We still have this big high overhead, and that means that temperatures today and tomorrow in the valley will be up around 100 degrees. But over the course of the weekend, this little low begins to come inland, and that begins to push the high a little bit farther out and gives us more of an onshore flow, especially on Sunday afternoon. Little low goes by. Now, my concern here is that we could see, even though the temperatures will be cooler and humidity will be a little higher, it will be windier on both areas that are burning currently. So usually think about cooler weather decreases fire potential, and it does, but if you have an existing fire and you have a lot of wind, well, that might not be such a good thing. And then getting into next week, that same pattern holds, little ridge here. But then a couple of days ago when I was talking about this, I called this Fantasyland. This is all the way to next weekend. So this is the weekend of the 17th, 18th. The high is now farther to the east. Deep trough here. This would be much cooler weather, keeping temperatures in the 80s and 90s. But again, relatively windy, so that if the park fire were still going robustly a week from now, we could see a lot of fire activity on that, despite the fact that the temperatures will be cooler. But that's a nice pattern, something we haven't seen for about 6 weeks or so. Let's see. Let me talk about the winds aloft. And so these are the winds up around 10,000 feet. And as we go through the day today, I'll go to this afternoon. So for instance, consider the winds here in El Dorado County, southwesterly. I mentioned the fact that the surface winds this morning are relatively light, but this afternoon, as the fire gets going a little bit more, the smoke will get carried up Interstate 80, and the same will be true here in the park fire. You see the winds vent that smoke off to the north and to the east. That wind continues into the day Saturday, same direction. So you'll find very similar fire conditions on both Friday and Saturday. And then we get into the day on Sunday. Here comes that deeper trough. Cooler air comes in, good strong onshore breeze that I'll show you in just a second. And then here's my concern as we get into next week and the next deeper trough comes our way. Look at these stronger winds aloft at 10,000 feet. These are winds that are up around 40 miles an hour, could turn quite windy in the Sierra. So if there is an existing fire on Sunday, Monday, as that trough comes in, we could see the fires increase in intensity just because of the winds aloft. The winds die down, and then as we get into that next weekend, the weekend of the 17th, 18th, once again the winds pick up again, especially in the Sierra with winds at 10,000 feet over 40 knots. But it is going to turn cooler. That's the good news here. And for that, let's take a look at our surface winds. These are the surface winds today. Not much going on through the middle part of the day. In areas where the fires are burning, the winds are what we've always been seeing, generally southwesterly. As we get to around 5 o'clock this afternoon, turns windy on the east side of the Sierra. The delta breeze comes up, should be a pretty comfortable, warm, but comfortable evening in Sacramento County and San Joaquin County. And then the same will be true on Saturday. On Saturday morning, the winds are generally light, but southwesterly, windy again in the Sierra. And then into the afternoon, the delta breeze comes up. And then on Sunday afternoon, that breeze becomes much more widespread. Look at that wind coming all the way up the valley like that, all the way into Tehama County. So this is, I think this is going to be a critical day. I think Sunday is going to be a critical day on the Park Fire to see if it, instead of going in the northeast direction, it could all of a sudden turn in more of a southerly direction up toward Mount Lassen, which is what they do not want. But for the areas like the valley, we'll see a nice breezy Sunday afternoon with temperatures staying much, much cooler and somewhat windy in the Sierra. So yeah, we will likely see temperatures both today, Friday, and again Saturday in the valley in that, let's say, 98, 102 range, depending on where you are. But then we will see widespread cooling. And right now it looks as though next week we may not see any days over 100 degrees. And we haven't seen a stretch like that in about 6 weeks. We've tossed in a couple of days here and there, but it seems like most days over the last 6 weeks have been over 100 degrees. But there is going to be some relief coming in that, and I think your air conditioner will appreciate the break. So that's everything I've got for you on this Friday morning. Like I said, it is a good-looking day. We'll keep an eye on the fires because, again, the weather could turn critical for those, even with cooler weather coming. It is going to get windier in the areas around the fire. So a lot to keep up with. That's everything I've got on this Friday morning. Make it a great day. I'll talk with you later.